Hey, hey, wherever you are across the globe, welcome back. So, tonight we're going to be doing something a little bit different. I am going to be live reviewing the first of two presidential debates between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Now, wait, before you get up in a tizzy, what this review is about is how both of these individuals employ their personal brands to get their points across. What I will not be doing is weighing in on anything that is political. Instead, we are looking at the approach that they employ in order to drive their point home. So I just want to make sure that that's super clear. You all know that I am a fan of personal brands and what they mean and how we use them to get our points across and effectively communicate. So, without further ado, let's go.
So we're working to bring down the price of around the kitchen table, and that's what we're going to get done.
Thank you. President Trump?
We have the greatest economy in the history of our country. We have never done so well. Everybody was amazed by it. Other countries were copying us. We got hit with COVID, and when we did, we spent the money necessary so we wouldn't end up in a Great Depression, the likes of which we had in 1929. By the time we finished, so we did a great job. We got a lot of credit for the economy, a lot of credit for the military, and no wars, and so many other things. Everything was rocking good. But the thing we never got the credit for, and we should have, is getting us out of that COVID mess. He created mandates. That was a disaster for our country. But other than that, we had given them back a country where the stock market actually was higher than pre-COVID, and nobody thought that was even possible. The only jobs he created are for illegal immigrants and bounce-back jobs, a bounce-back from the COVID. He has not done a good job. He's done a poor job, and inflation's killing our country. It is absolutely killing us.
Thank you. President Biden?
So strong and
Well, look, the greatest economy in the world. He's the only one who thinks that, I think. I don't know anybody else who thinks he had the greatest economy in the world. And, you know, the fact of the matter is that we find ourselves in a situation where his economy,
you can see
rewarded the wealthy.
there is some
He had the
restraint
largest tax cut in American history.
that is happening
$2 trillion.
here.
He raised a deficit larger than any president has in any one term. He's the only president other than Herbert Hoover who's lost more jobs than he had when he began, since Herbert Hoover.
The nodding and the
idea
eyes
that he
darting.
did something that was significant in the military. You know, when he was president, there was
It
still
adds
killing
a
people
little
in
bit to,
Afghanistan.
you can tell there's
When he was
this
president, we still
energy
found
of
ourselves in a position where
waiting
you
to
had
respond
a notion
almost.
that we were this safe country. The truth is, I'm the only president this century that doesn't have this decade, that doesn't have any troops dying anywhere in the world like he did.
So there was some
President
correction
Trump,
there.
I want to follow up if I can.
Am I allowed to respond to him?
Well, I'm going to ask you a follow-up. You can do whatever you want with the minute that we give you. I want to follow up. You want to impose a 10% tariff on all goods coming into the U.S. How will you ensure that
So
doesn't
of course,
drive prices
Jake is
even
an
higher?
expert.
It's not going to
and-
drive them higher. It's just going to cause countries that have been ripping us off for years, like China and many others, in all fairness to China. It's going to just force them to pay us a lot of money, reduce our deficit tremendously, and give us a lot of power for other things. But he made a statement. The only thing he was right about is I gave
So
you
there's
the
that
largest
pointing.
tax cut in history. I also gave you the largest regulation cut in history. That's why we had all the jobs. And the jobs went down, and then they bounced back. And he's
And you
taking
can see
credit
there's
for
the
bounce back
disagreement
jobs. You
on
can't
Joe
do that.
Biden's
He
face,
also
and he
said
is
he inherited 9% inflation.
listening
No, he inherited almost
intently.
no inflation, and it stayed that way for 14 months. And then it blew up under
You'll
his
notice the
leadership
use of the
because they spent money
hands, a
like
state's
a bunch of
authority.
people that didn't know what they were doing, and they don't know what they were doing. It was the worst, probably
Even
the
if
worst
you're not
administration
sure
in
of what it
history.
is that you're
There's never
saying.
been. And as far as Afghanistan is concerned, I was getting out of Afghanistan, but we were getting out with dignity, with strength, with power. He got out. It was the most embarrassing day
very
in the
much
history
on
of our
brand,
country's
and
life.
that is what
President
is
Trump, over the last 8
appearing as
years
authority.
under both of your administrations, the national debt soared to record highs. And according to a new nonpartisan analysis, President
Okay,
Trump,
the
your
look
administration
here-
approved $8.4 trillion in new debt. Well, so far, President Biden, you've approved $4.3 trillion in new debt. So, former President Trump, many of the tax cuts that you signed into law are set to expire next year. You want to extend them and go even further, you say. With the U.S. facing trillion-dollar deficits and record debt, why should top earners and corporations pay even less in taxes than they do now?
Because the tax cuts spurred the greatest economy that we've ever seen just prior to COVID.
So you'll notice the clipping answering right after Jake is
much
finished.
Much better than just about any other country. But we spurred
it
the
again,
taxes spurred. Now,
it's showing a assuredness, even though what is saying,
to 21% from 39%.
even though what he is saying might
that,
not necessarily be factual, but there is an assuredness.
And companies were bringing back trillions of dollars back into our country. The country was going like never before. And we were ready to start paying down debt. We were ready to start using the liquid gold right under our feet, the oil and gas right under our feet.
Liquid
we were going to
gold.
have something that nobody else has had. We got hit with COVID.
It's very retro.
We did a lot to fix it. I gave him an unbelievable situation with all of the therapeutics and all of the things
The
that we
look
came
over
up
to
with.
the side.
We gave him something.
The glare,
Remember,
almost.
more people died under his administration, even though we had largely fixed it. More people died under his administration than our administration, and we were right in the middle of it. Something which a
That
lot of
was a
people don't like to
child
talk
by
about. But he had far
look
more
that he
people
gave.
dying in his administration. He did the mandate, which is a disaster, mandating it. The vaccine went out. He did a mandate on the vaccine, which is the thing that
So you'll notice the
people most
repetitiveness
objected
of the
to about
words
the
and the
vaccine.
language here.
And he did a very poor job, just a very poor job. And I will tell you, not only poor there, but throughout the entire world, we're no longer respected as a country. They don't respect our leadership. They don't respect the United States anymore. We're like a third world nation between weaponization of his election, trying to go after his political opponent, all of the
This
things
is
he's
ginger
done.
beer,
We've
by the way.
become like a third world nation, and it's a shame. The damage he's done to our country, and I'd love to ask him, and will, why he allowed millions of people to come in here from prisons, jails,
So you'll
and mental
see the
institutions
turning of the body,
to come into our
and
country
again, very much
destroy
on
our
brand.
country.
President Trump, we will get to immigration later in this block. President Biden, I want to give you an opportunity to respond to this question about the national debt.
He had the largest national debt of any president in a four-year period, number one. Number two, that $2 trillion tax cut benefited the very wealthy. What I'm going to do is fix the tax system. For example, we have 1,000 trillionaires in America. Billionaires in America. And what's happening? They're in a situation where they, in fact, pay 8.2% in taxes. If they
So
just
you'll
paid
notice now he's
24%,
introducing more of the hand
25%, either one of those
motion.
numbers,
And again, that is
they'd raise
establishing
$500
authority.
billion dollars, I should say, in a 10-year period. We'd be able to wipe out his debt. We'd be able to help make sure that all those things we need to do, child care, elder care, making sure that we continue to strengthen our health care system, making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the with the COVID. Excuse me, with dealing with everything we have to do with. Look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump?
Well, he's right. He did beat Medicare. He beat it to death, and he's destroying Medicare because all of these people are coming in. They're putting them on Medicare. They're putting them on Social Security. They're going to destroy
It's an
Social
interesting
Security.
choice
This man is going to
that
single-handedly
Donald Trump made there.
destroy Social Security. These millions
You'll note
and
he
millions
did
of people
not
coming
lean
in,
into what
they're
he
trying to
usually
put them
does,
on
which is
Social
on
Security.
brand, which
He will
is
wipe out
take
Social
advantage
Security.
of what
will
he
wipe out
saw
Medicare.
happening
So he
in
was right
real
in the way
time,
he finished that
which
sentence. And it's a
was
shame.
Joe
What's
Biden
happened
having
to
a
our
little bit of a
country
difficult
in the
time
last 4
getting to the
years
end
is
of the
not to be
thoughts.
believed.
He
Foreign
did
countries,
not.
I'm friends
Donald
with
Trump
a
did
lot
not
of people.
take
They cannot
advantage
believe
of
what
that
happened to
moment,
the United States of America. We're no longer
which is an
respected.
interesting choice and a
They don't
deliberate
like
one.
us. We give them everything they want, and they think we're stupid. They think we're very stupid people. What we're doing for other countries, and they do nothing for us. What this man has done is absolutely criminal.
Thank you, President Trump. Dana?
This is the first presidential election since the Supreme Court
Dana
overturned Roe v.
Bash.
Wade.
Come
This
on,
morning,
White.
the court ruled on yet another abortion case, temporarily
Even got the
allowing
white
emergency
lav mics
abortions
on,
to
too.
continue in Idaho, despite that state's restrictive ban. Former President Trump, you take credit for the decision to overturn Roe v. Wade, which returned the issue of abortion to the states.
Correct.
However, the federal government still plays a role in whether or not women have access to abortion pills. They're used in about 2/3 of all abortions. As president, would you block abortion medication?
First of all, the Supreme Court just approved the abortion pill. And I agree with their decision to have done that, and I will not block it. And if you look at this whole question that you're asking, complex but not really complex. 51 years ago,
so what is happening in real time is that, again, there's the hand motion, but you'll notice that
Democrats, Republicans,
he
liberals,
is
conservatives,
pushing back on her a
wanted
little
back
bit of the
religious
questioning
leaders.
and the line of
And what I
questioning
did
here.
is I put 3 great Supreme
And
Court
then tying that
justices on the
together
court, and they happened to vote in favor of
with
killing Roe v.
actions,
Wade and moving it
movements
back to the
that
states. This
he
is something
made.
that everybody wanted.
Or that he
Now,
wants
10 years ago
individuals
or so,
to
they started
know
talking about how many
or think
weeks
that
and
he
how many
made.
this, getting into other things. But every legal scholar throughout the world, the most respected, wanted it brought back to the states. I did that. Now the states are working it out. If you look at Ohio, it was a decision that was an end result that was a little bit more liberal than you would have thought. Kansas, I would say the same thing. Texas is different. Florida is different. But they're all making their own decisions right now. And right
Joe
now,
Biden,
the states control it. That's
his
the vote of the people.
attention and
Like
glaring
Ronald Reagan,
in that
I
direction,
believe in the
and then
exceptions. I am
body
a
motion.
person
So
that
you'll note
believes.
him
And
everything
frankly,
from the
I think it's
smirking
important to believe
to
in
the
the
nodding
exceptions. Some people you have to
to
follow
the
your heart.
glaring
Some people
over.
don't believe in that. But
He's
I believe in the
using
exceptions
his body
for
language
rape, incest, and the life of the mother.
here
I think it's very
to
important. Some people don't follow
speak
your heart, but you have
without
to get elected
speaking.
also, and because that has to do with other things. You got to get elected. The problem they have is they're radical because they will take the life of a child in the 8th month, the 9th month, and even after birth. After birth, if you look at the former
Again,
governor of Virginia,
you'll note
he
that
was willing to do this.
in
He
Donald
said,
Trump's
we'll put the
languaging,
baby
it's very
aside,
typical of his
and
style.
we'll determine what we do with the baby, meaning we'll kill the baby. What happened is we brought
Where
it
it
back
is
to the
that
states,
there is
and the
this
country is now coming together on
very
this issue. It's
stern
been a
hand
great
movements
thing.
here to
Thank you. President Biden.
add
It's been a
exclamation.
terrible thing, what you've done. The fact is that the vast majority of constitutional scholars supported Roe when it was decided. Supported Roe. And that's this idea that they're all against it is just ridiculous. And this is the guy who says the state should be able to have it. We're in a state where in 6 weeks, you don't even know whether you're pregnant or not, but you cannot see a doctor, and have him decide on what your circumstances are, whether you need help. The idea that
So
states are
you
able
see
to
the
do this is
intentional
a little
word
like saying,
choice.
we're gonna
Have
turn
him,
civil rights back to the states. Let each state have a different rule. Look, there's
when
so
it
many
comes
young women
to
who have
physician
been,
choice,
including a young
and this is a
woman who just
matter that
was
women
murdered.
deal with, so it was
And
very
he
intentional.
went to the funeral. The idea that she was murdered by an immigrant coming in. They talk about that, but here's the deal: there's a lot of young women are being raped by their in-laws, by their spouses, brothers and sisters, it's just ridiculous, and they can do nothing about it. And they try to arrest them when they cross state lines.
Thank you.
There have been many young women murdered by the same people he allows to come across our border. We have a border that's the most dangerous place anywhere in the
So
world. Considered the
although
most
the
dangerous
topic
place
at
anywhere
hand
in the
is
world.
not
And he opened it up,
immigration,
and these killers are coming into
you'll
our
note
country.
that
And they are raping and
he's
killing
using
women.
this opportunity,
And it's a terrible
very
thing.
much on
As far
brand,
as the
to
abortion
bring
is concerned,
forward
it is now back with the states. The states are voting.
this issue,
In many
which
cases,
is
it's
perceived as
frankly
a
a very
hot
liberal
button
decision.
issue.
In many cases, it's the opposite. But they're voting, and it's bringing it back to the vote of the people, which is what everybody wanted, including the founders, if they knew about this issue, which, frankly, they didn't. But they would have. Everybody wanted brought back. Ronald Reagan wanted it brought back. He wasn't able to get it. Everybody wanted it
So
brought back.
there is
And
this tie-in
many
to
presidents
value.
had tried to get it back. I was the one to do it. And again, this gives it the vote of the people.
That is the
and that's where they
values
wanted
of
it. Every legal scholar
this country,
wanted it
which
that
are
way.
the
Staying
people,
on the topic
the
of abortion,
founders.
President Biden, 7
That
states.
was that pull through there.
I'll let you do that. This is the same topic. 7 states have no legal restrictions on how far into a pregnancy a woman can obtain an abortion. Do you support any legal limits on how late a
So
woman
you'll note
should be able
here
to
the
terminate
listening.
pregnancy?
I supported Roe v. Wade, which had 3 trimesters. The first
And the
time was
immediate
between
answer,
the woman and the doctor.
again, to
Second
establish
time
that
was between
authority,
the doctor and an extreme situation.
as
The
well
third
as
time is
to
between
cement
the doctor. Between the woman and the state.
the belief
The idea
and
that
what
the
has been
politicians,
executed.
that the founders wanted the politicians to be the ones making decisions about women's health is ridiculous. That's the last. No politician should
Okay,
be
so
making that decision.
you see
A
there
doctor should be making those decisions.
Donald Trump in
That's how it should be run.
wanting to
That's what you're gonna
respond
do.
here,
And if I'm elected,
and
I'm gonna
again using
restore
that
Roe v. Wade.
same tactic of the glare.
He can take the life of the baby in the 9th month and even after birth, because some states, Democrat run, take it after birth. Again, the former governor of Virginia, put the baby down, then we decide what to do with it. So he's willing to, as we say, rip the baby out of the womb in the 9th month.
So again,
and kill the baby.
very intentional with the word choice
Nobody wants
here.
that to happen, Democrat or Republican. Nobody wants it to happen.
That is simply not true. That Roe v.
Okay,
Wade
so
does
this
not
is the first time we're
provide
seeing
for
a
that.
direct
That's not the circumstance. Only if a woman's life is in danger,
approach
she's
or
gonna
a
die.
direct
That's the only
response
circumstance in which that can
at
happen. But we are
Donald
not
Trump
for
here,
late-term abortion,
and he
period.
is nodding.
Period.
You could tell he was
The Roe
wanting to
v.
respond.
Wade, you have late-term abortion. You can do whatever you want, depending on the state. You can do whatever you want. We don't think that's a good thing. We think it's a radical
Again,
thing.
notice
we think the
the
Democrats are
faces
the
in
radicals,
between
not the Republicans.
each
51
candidate's
years, that
session.
was the law. 51 years, constitutional
Or that is
scholarship said it was
response.
the right way to go. 51 years, and it was taken away.
So
because this guy
intentional with
was
choosing
very
and
conservative
repeating
members on the
the
Supreme
51,
Court. He takes
51,
credit for taking it
51.
away. What's he going to do? What's he going to do? In fact, if the MAGA Republicans, he gets elected, and the MAGA Republicans control the Congress.
So you'll
and
note
they
here that
pass
there's a shift in
universal ban
style.
on abortion, period, across the
Apparently,
board.
when Joe
That's 6
Biden
weeks or 7
left
or 8
off
10
of
weeks,
or moved
something
away
very,
from
very
script,
conservative. Is he going to
that
sign
confidence
bill?
level
I'll
has
veto it.
risen.
He'll sign it.
You'll note again
Thank
the
you.
hand
Let's
movements
turn now to
here.
the issue of immigration and border security.
to
President
the next
Biden, a
topic.
record number of migrants have illegally crossed the southern border on your watch. Overwhelming border states and overburdening cities such as New York and Chicago, and in some cases causing real safety and security concerns. Given that, why should voters trust you to solve this crisis?
Because we worked very hard to get a bipartisan agreement that not only changed all of that, it made sure that we are in a situation where you had no circumstance where they could come across the border with the number of border police there are now. We significantly increased the number of asylum officers. Significantly, by the way, the Border Patrol endorsed me.
So you'll note the eyebrow
endorsed my
raise here.
position.
So that
In
is
addition
to,
that,
you know,
we
in
found
case you
ourselves in a
didn't
situation
know,
where when he was president, he was separating babies from their mothers, putting them in cages, making sure the families were separated. That's not the right way to go. What I've done since I've changed the law, what's happened? I've changed it in a way that now you're in a situation where there are 40% fewer people coming across the border illegally. That's better than when he left office. And I'm going to continue to move until we get the total ban on the total initiative relative to what we can do with more Border Patrol and more asylum officers.
so you can see
President
the
Trump?
questioning
I
here.
really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows
So
what
he
he said either. Look,
took the advantage
we have the
of
safest border in the history of our country.
Joe
All he had
Biden
to do was leave it. All he had to
being
do
less
was leave
sure
it. He
to jump in
decided to
there
open up our
and
border,
kind of do a
open
little
up
bit
our
of a
country
dig,
to
which he did not take
people
at the
that are
beginning, but he did
from
utilize
prisons,
there.
people that are from mental institutions, insane asylum, terrorists. We have the largest
So
number
you'll
of
note,
terrorists coming into
moving
our country
into
right now. All terrorists,
the themes
all over the world,
of
not just
fear,
in South America, all over the world. They come
and
from
again,
the
that
Middle East, everywhere.
assuredness.
All over the world,
And
they're pouring
this
in.
is, again, on
And this guy
brand.
just left it open. And he didn't need legislation because I didn't have legislation. I said, close the border. We had the safest border in history. In that final couple of months of my presidency, we had, according to Border Patrol, who is great, and by the way, who endorsed me for president, but I won't say that, but they endorsed me for president.
So again, you
Brandon,
can see
just speak to
here,
him. But look, we had the safest border
President
in
Biden
history.
is
Now we have the worst border in history.
considering
There's
how
never
he
been
will
anything
respond.
like it. And people
And again,
are
very
dying
much on
all
brand
over
for
the place,
him as
including the people
well.
that are coming up in
Thank you, President
caravans.
Trump. President Biden?
The only terrorist who's done anything crossing the border is one who came along and killed three, under his administration, killed an Al-Qaeda person come in and his administration, killed three American soldiers, killed 3 American soldiers. That's the only terrorist that's there. I'm not saying that no terrorist ever got through, but the idea they're emptying their prisons, we're welcoming these people.
So again, you
That's
can
simply
see
not true. There's no
that as
data
time is going
to support
on
what he
in the
said.
duration
Once
of
again,
this,
he's
that,
exaggerating, he's lying.
you know, the patience.
President Trump, staying on the topic of immigration, you said
Trump's
that you're going
side
to carry
is
out,
running
quote, the largest
thin, and
domestic
again,
deportation operation in American history, unquote. Does
you know,
that mean that you will
on
deport
brand with the
every
stance,
undocumented
very
immigrant
firm,
in America,
forward-facing.
including those who have jobs, including those whose spouses are citizens, and including those who have lived here for decades? And if
I
so,
like
how
Jake's
will you do it?
tie.
Just 1 second. He
Yeah.
said we killed 3 people. The people we killed are al-Baghdadi and Soleimani, the 2 greatest terrorists, biggest terrorists anywhere in the world. And it had a huge impact on everything, not just border, on everything. He's the one that killed people with the bad water, including
You can even
hundreds of
see
thousands
Joe
of
Biden
people dying,
in the stance and the
also
breathing.
killing our
Like
citizens when they come in.
He really
we are
is showing
living right
astonishment
now in a rat's
for what
nest.
it is that
They're
he is
killing our
hearing. And again,
people
that's
in
very
New
much
York,
on
in
his
California,
brand.
and every state in the union, because we
Has
don't have
been.
borders anymore. Every state is now a border. And because of his ridiculous, insane, and very
Okay, so we're
stupid
seeing now more
policies,
of
people are
what
coming
is
in and they're
traditionally
killing
associated
our
with
citizens at a level that we've
Donald
never
Trump's
seen. We call it
personality, which
migrant
is more
crime.
of this
I
like
call it
raised
Biden migrant
cadence.
crime. They're killing our citizens at a level that we've never seen before. And you're reading it like these three incredible young girls over the last few days. One of them, I just spoke to the mother, and they just had the funeral for this girl, 12 years old.
You can
This
see,
is
if you're
horrible
noticing
what's
here,
taken
Joe
place.
Biden's
What's taken place
expression
in our
and
country.
face.
We're literally an uncivilized country now. He doesn't want it to be. He just doesn't know. He opened the borders. Nobody's ever seen anything like. And we
You're
have
truly
to get
getting,
a lot
and
of these
he's
people out, and we
exasperated.
have
Like,
to
you
get
can
them
see
out
the
fast
breathing
because they're going to destroy
here.
our country. Just take a look at where they're living. They're living
So
in
this is an
luxury
opportunity
hotels
for
in New York City and other
recouping
places.
here.
Our veterans are on
When
the
it is
street.
that
They're
someone
dying
else
because
is
he doesn't
speaking
care
and you may
about our
not agree
veterans.
with
He
what
doesn't
it
care.
is
He
they're
doesn't like the
saying,
military at all.
taking that
And he
opportunity
doesn't
to
care about our veterans. Nobody been worse. I had the highest approval rating for veterans taking care of the VA.
your thoughts
He has the worst. He's gotten rid of
for
all
a
the
response.
things that I
But the
approved.
approach to
Choice that I got
response
through
is
Congress,
just as
all of the
important.
different things I approved, they abandoned. We had by far the highest, and now it's down in less than half because he's done all these great things that we did. And I think he did it just because I approved it, which is crazy. But he has killed so many people at our border by allowing all of these people to come in. And it's a very sad day in America.
President Biden, you have the mic.
Every single thing he said is a lie. Every single one. For example, veterans
Okay, so
are
you
a hell of a
notice
lot
he
better
pulled
off since
in
they passed the PACT Act.
the overarching
1 million of them
statement,
now have
and then now
insurance,
pulling
their
in
families
the
have it.
examples
Their
or
families have it
proof.
because what happened.
And again, very much
whether
on
it was Agent
brand.
Orange or burn pits, they're all being covered now.
Less
And he opposed-
emotional
his group opposed that.
bells,
We're also in a situation
Joe
where
Biden
we have
rings,
great
and it's
respect
more
for
or less
veterans.
tied
my son
to
spent a year in Iraq.
what is on
Living
paper
right
or
next to one of
facts.
those burn pits, came back with stage
Less
4
fear
glioblastoma. I was recently in France.
hallmark
for
to his
D-Day,
approach.
and I spoke all about those heroes that died. I went to the World War II cemetery, World War I cemetery he refused to go to. He was standing with his 4-star
The puckering
general,
of the lip
and he told me, he said, I don't
for,
want to go in there
Donald
because
Trump.
they're a bunch of losers and suckers. My son was not a loser, was not a sucker. You're the sucker. You're the loser.
Okay.
President Trump?
First of all, that was a made-up quote, suckers and losers. They made it up. It was in a third-rate magazine that's failing, like many of these magazines. He made that up. He put it in commercials. We've notified him. We had 19 people that said I didn't
So
say
you
it.
could see
And think
there
of
that
this. Who would
Joe Biden
say,
just took
I'm
the
at a
approach that is
cemetery,
very
or I'm talking
similar
about our
to
veterans?
Donald Trump's
Because
brand,
nobody's taking
which
better care. I'm
is,
so
you know,
glad this came up, and he
get
brought
personal
it up.
shots in
There's nobody that's
there
taken better
as
care
kind of
of
a
our soldiers than I
counter-defense.
have. To think that I would, in
Off-brand,
front of generals and others,
but
say,
here
suckers and losers. We
was
have
a very
19
deliberate
people
choice.
that said it was never said by me. It was made up by him, just like Russia was made up, just like the 51 intelligence agents are made up, just like the new thing with the 16 economists are talking. It's the same thing. 51 intelligence agents said that the laptop was Russia disinformation. It wasn't.
You
that
can
came from
see
his
that
son,
again
Hunter.
on brand.
It wasn't Russia disinformation.
Thoughtfulness
He made
here,
up
and
the
Joe Biden is
suckers
trying
and losers, so
to
he should
reconcile
apologize
what
to
it
me right
is
now.
that Donald Trump is
Four-star
saying.
general standing to your side who was on your staff who said you said it, period. That's number one. And number two, the idea that I have to apologize to you for anything along the line. We've done more for veterans than any president has in American history. And they now are in their family. The only sacred obligation we have as a country is to care for our veterans when they come home and their families and equip them when they go to war. That's what we're doing. That's what the VA is doing now. They're doing more for veterans than ever before in our history.
All right. Thank you so much.
Let's move to the topic of foreign policy. I want to begin with Russia's war against Ukraine, which is now in its third year. Former President Trump, Russian President Vladimir Putin says he'll only end this war if Russia keeps the Ukrainian territory it has already claimed and Ukraine abandons its bid to join NATO. Are Putin's terms acceptable to you?
First of all, our veterans and our soldiers can't stand this guy. They can't stand him. They think he's the worst commander-in-chief, if that's what you call him. that we've ever had. They can't stand
eye
it.
rub
So
here,
let's get that straight. And they like me
is,
more than just
you know,
about any of them. And that's based on every single bit of information. As far as Russia and Ukraine, if we had a real
he
president,
took that
the
opportunity
president
again,
that
very much on
that
brand
was respected by
for
Putin,
going back
he would have
in,
never
dovetailing
invaded
the
Ukraine.
previous question.
A lot of people are dead right
And
now.
that
much
eye
more
rub
than people
there
know. You know, they
was
talk
again
about numbers.
a
You can
gesture
double
of
those numbers, maybe
disbelief,
triple those numbers.
which is again on
He did
brand.
nothing to stop it. In fact, I think he encouraged Russia from going in. I'll tell you what happened. He was so bad with Afghanistan. It was such a
You'll note the
horrible
glare.
embarrassment, most embarrassing
Turn
moment in the
away.
history of our country, that when Putin watched that and he saw the incompetence, that he should have fired those generals, like I fired the one that you mentioned. And so he's got no love lost, but he should have fired those generals.
Okay.
No general got fired for
So
the
here's
most
where the mics being
embarrassing
off is
moment
are,
in the
is
history of our
deployed
country,
because we
Afghanistan,
couldn't just
where
now
we
hear.
left billions of dollars of equipment
Y'all
behind.
noticed there was somebody
We lost
passing by.
13 beautiful soldiers, and 38 soldiers
That
were
was on brand.
obliterated. And by the way, we
That
left
was not
people
on
behind too.
CNN.
We left American citizens behind. When Putin saw that, he said, "You know what? I think we're going to go in and maybe take this was his dream. I talked to him about it, his dream. The difference is he never
So you'll
would have
note
invaded
there,
Ukraine. Never.
bringing forward
Just
his
like
camaraderie
Israel would have never
with
been invaded
Putin and bringing that, and that
in
is
a
very
million
on
years
brand.
by Hamas.
So we have seen
You know
over the
why?
course of time
Because
that
Iran was
lift
broke with me. I wouldn't let anybody do
from
business
Donald
with them.
Trump
They ran out
regarding
of money. They were
his
broke. They had no
relationships
money
with
for Hamas. They had no money
the
for
likes
anything.
of,
No money for
Putin.
terror. That's why you had no terror at all during my
And
administration.
that tie through
This
to,
place, the whole
because
world
of
is
those
blowing up under
relationships,
him.
this is what has happened. Because of
President
my
Biden?
personal relationships,
Never heard so
this
much
is what
more like you in my
happened.
whole life.
Less
The fact
about
of the matter is
overall
that we're in a
thinking
situation where,
on
let's take the last
strategy,
point
but
first.
more or less my
Iran
personal brand
attacked American
is what
troops,
helped
kill,
level
caused
things
brain
and kept
damage
things from being worse
for
than
a
they
number
are.
of these troops, and he did nothing about it. Recently, not when he was president, they attacked. He said they're just having headaches. That's all it is. He didn't do a thing when the attack took place. Number one. Number two, we got over 100,000 Americans and others out of Afghanistan during that airlift. Number three, we found ourselves in a situation
Okay,
where,
again, you'll note
if you take
here,
a look at what
very
Trump
much on
did in
brand,
Ukraine,
the counterattack
this guy told
using
Ukraine, told Trump,
the
do whatever
facts,
you want,
data,
and do
and
whatever you
stats
want.
that are
And that's
available
exactly what Trump
to
did.
President Biden,
To Putin,
and that is,
encourage
again,
him, do
very much
whatever
on
you
brand.
want. And he went in. And listen to what he said when he went in. He was going to take Kyiv in 5 days, remember? Because it's part of the old Soviet Union. That's what he wanted to reestablish. Kyiv, and he in fact didn't do it at all. He didn't
sorry,
wasn't able
y'all.
to
If y'all
get it
hear any
done.
stamping
And
around,
they've
it's the
lost
neighbors stamping
they've
upstairs.
lost thousands and thousands of troops, 500,000 troops.
President Trump,
I
as
never
come back
said
to you
that.
for 1 minute, I just want to go back to my original question, which is, are Putin's terms acceptable to you? Keeping the
No, they're
territory
not
in Ukraine.
acceptable. No, they're not acceptable.
Okay.
But look, this is a war that never should have started. If we had a leader in this war, he led everybody along. He's given $200 billion now or more to Ukraine. He's given $200 billion. That's a lot of money. I don't think there's ever been anything like it. Every time that Zelensky comes to this country, he walks away with $60 billion. He's the greatest salesman ever. And I'm not knocking him. I'm not knocking anything. I'm only saying the money that we're spending on this war, and we shouldn't be spending, it should have never happened. I will have that war settled between Putin and Zelensky as president-elect before I take office on January 20th. I'll have that war settled. People being killed so needlessly, so stupidly, and I will get it settled, and I'll get it settled fast before I take office.
So
Biden, you
again,
have a
leading
minute.
into, and very much on brand,
fact is
before I
that
take
Putin is a
office,
war criminal.
as if his
He's
personal
killed
relationship,
thousands and thousands
he'll be
of
able to
people.
negotiate.
And
Very
he has
much on
made one
brand,
thing
right?
clear.
We're
He
leading back
wants
to the days of the
reestablish
apprentice.
what was part of
almost.
the Soviet Empire, not just a piece. He wants all of Ukraine. That's what he wants. And then you think he'll stop there? Do you think he'll stop when if he takes Ukraine? What do you think happens to Poland? What do you think of Belarus? What do you think happens to those NATO countries? And so if you want a war, you ought to find out what he's going to do, because if in fact he does what he says and walks away, and by the way, all that money we give Ukraine are from weapons we make here in the United States. We give them the weapons, not the money at this point. And our NATO allies have produced as much funding for Ukraine as we have. That's why we're strong.
Thank you. Moving on to the Middle East. In October, Hamas attacked Israel, killing more than 1,000 people and taking hundreds of hostages. Among those held and thought to still be alive are 5 Americans.
I have a feeling that this is where
Israel's
both will
response has
have the
killed
same
thousands of
stance. Let's see.
Palestinians and created a humanitarian crisis in Gaza. President Biden, you've put forward a proposal to resolve this conflict, but so far Hamas has not released the remaining hostages, and Israel is continuing its military offensive in Gaza. So what additional leverage will you use to get Hamas and Israel to end the war? You have 2 minutes.
Number one, everyone from the United Nations Security Council straight through to the G7 to the Israelis and Netanyahu himself have endorsed the plan I put forward. Which has 3 stages to it. The first stage is trade the hostages for a ceasefire. Second phase is a ceasefire with additional conditions. The third phase is the end of the war. The only one who wants the war to continue is Hamas. Number one, they're the only ones standing out.
So you'll note here, leaning into the facts, leaning into a plan that he has for
Israel, we're trying to say the only thing
this
I've
particular
Israel
instance here, and the layout of
they don't work very well in
the plan and explanation of the why. So again, this is very much on brand for President Biden. Where it is very much, leaning into the actual data and the facts here.
On Israel. No one was hurt. No one Israeli was accidentally killed, and it just stopped. We saved Israel. We are the biggest producer of support for Israel of anyone in the world.
Note here, the expression, very much on brand. We've seen this before. On Donald Trump's face, the head tilt here.
To how they can get Hamas like we did bin Laden. You don't have to do it. And by the way, they've been greatly weakened, Hamas, and they should be. They should
It'll be
eliminated.
interesting to see his response.
But you've got
here.
to be careful for using certain weapons among population centers.
Just going back to Ukraine for 1 second. We have an ocean separating us. The European nations
You'll
together.
note he came back
spent
to
billion or maybe more
foreign
than that,
policy
less than
issue.
us. Why doesn't he call them? So you got to put up your money like I did with
where
NATO.
they
I got
differ,
them to put up hundreds of billions of dollars.
Right?
The Secretary General of NATO said Trump
In
did the most
stance.
incredible
And
job I've ever seen.
he has 2 minutes for the answer to answer this question,
Almost 100%
and that is an
of the
intentional
money
choice.
was paid by us. He
On
didn't
brand,
do that. He's getting all. You got to ask these people to put up the money. We're over $100 billion more spent, and it has a bigger impact on them because of location, because we have an ocean in between. You got to ask them. As far as Israel and Hamas, Israel's the one that wants to go. He said the only one who wants to keep going is Hamas. Actually, Israel is the one, and you should let him go and let him finish the job. He doesn't want to do it. He's become like a Palestinian, but they don't like him because he's a very bad Palestinian. He's a weak one.
Interesting choice.
President Biden, you have a minute.
I've never heard so much foolishness. This is a guy who wants to get out of NATO. Are you going to stay in NATO? He's going to pull out of NATO. The idea that we have our strength lies
So
in
that
our
was
as well.
very interesting. The questioning there, kind of the prodding, and then as well, Donald Trump's expression, which served as
we have an
response.
Article 5 agreement. Attack on one is attack on all. You want to start the nuclear war? He keeps talking about.
So you see here, it's kind of he's showing agreement. Here,
and then move on
as I surmise, where they would be aligned on this issue.
He has no idea what the hell he's talking about. And by the way, I got 50 other nations around the world to support Ukraine.
This one is an interesting
Japan
one
South Korea,
because you'll see they have to show differences between what they will do and their approach. But it is interesting because they stand aligned on this issue. So you'll note here that Joe Biden as well went back to the matter of Ukraine.
Would you support the creation of an independent Palestinian state in order to achieve peace in the region?
I'd have to see, but before we do that, the problem we have is that we spend all the money. So they kill us on trade. I made great trade deals with the European nations because if you add them up, they're about the same size economically. Their economy is about the same size as the United States. And they were no cars, they don't want anything that we have, but we're supposed to take their cars, their food, their everything, their agriculture. I changed that. But the big thing I changed is they don't want to pay. And the only reason that he can play games with NATO is because I got them to put up hundreds of billions of dollars. I said, and he's right about this, I said, no, I'm not going to support NATO
Interesting
if you don't pay.
choice to
They
show
asked me that
an
question. Would you guard us
agreement
against Russia at a very
there
secret
with,
meeting of the
Joe Biden.
28 states at that time, nations at that time? And they said, no, if you don't pay, I won't do that. And you know what happened? Billions and billions of dollars came flowing in the next day and the next months.
Signature.
But now
Donald
we're
Trump,
in the same
billions
position.
and
We're
billions.
paying everybody's
Thank you.
bills.
The repeating
Let's turn
of
to the issue of
the word
democracy.
shows
Former
the
President Trump,
weight
I want to ask you about January
of
6, 2021.
what was done, what
after
happened.
You rallied your supporters that day.
Okay, they're addressing
Some of them
January
stormed the
6th.
Capitol to stop the constitutionally mandated counting of electoral votes. As president, you swore an oath to, quote, preserve, protect, and defend, unquote, the Constitution. What do you say to voters who believe that you violated that oath through your actions and inaction on January 6th and worry that you'll do it again?
Well, I don't think too many believe that. And let me tell you about January 6th. On January 6th, we had a great border. Nobody
Okay, so
coming
you
through,
can see
very
here
few.
the deflection
On January 6th, we
away
were
from
energy
the question
independent.
here.
On January 6th, we had the lowest taxes ever. We had the lowest
Lifting
regulations ever. On January
other
6th, we were
issues.
respected all over the world. All
And
over
again,
the
eating
world,
into
we were
the time and
respected.
very much on brand
And then he
here.
comes in, and we're now laughed at. We're like a bunch of stupid people. What happened to the United States' reputation under this man's leadership is horrible, including
It'll be
weaponization,
interesting
which
to
I'm
see
sure at
the
some point you'll be
choice
talking
that
about.
Joe Biden
where he
makes
goes after his
in
political
his
opponent
retort
because he can't beat him
here.
fair and square.
You have 80 seconds left. My question was, what do you say to those voters who believe
note
that you
that.
violated your constitutional oath through
There
your
was
actions
80
and
seconds
inaction
that were
on
left
January 6,
within the,
2021,
that
and worry
frame.
that you'll do it again?
Well, I didn't say that to anybody. I said peacefully and patriotically. And Nancy Pelosi, if you just watched the news from 2 days ago, on tape to her daughter, who's a documentary filmmaker, they say, but she's saying, oh,
Okay, there
no, it's my
is that
responsibility. I was
interesting
responsible for
scratching
this.
here.
Because
Joe
I offered
Biden
her
is really
10,000
listening
soldiers or
in
National Guard.
here.
And she turned them down. And the mayor of, in writing, by the way, the mayor,
But as
in
you
writing, turned it
see
down, the mayor
here,
of D.C.
this
They
question
turned it down.
that
I offered 10,000 because I could
Dick
see
raised,
I had
it
virtually
kind of
nothing to do.
exposed
They asked me to go make a speech.
a
I could
gap
see what
here.
was happening. Everybody was saying they're going to be there on January 6th. They're going to be there. And I said, you know what? That's a lot of people coming. You could feel it. You could feel it too, and you could feel it. And I said, they ought
An
to have
interesting
some
spin on this
National
question
Guard or whatever.
here.
And I offered it to her, and she now
But
admits
very
that
much on
she
brand.
turned it down. And it was the same day she was, I don't know, she can't be very happy with her daughter because it made her into a liar.
You'll note,
she said, I take
bringing
full
in other
responsibility
issues
for January 6th.
President Biden?
to not address the question that was asked here.
He encouraged those folks to go up to Capitol Hill, number one. I sat in the
You'll note
dining room of
here-
the Oval Office. He sat there for 3 hours.
Again,
3 hours
on
watching,
brand, lifting
begging,
up
being begged by his
the
vice president
things that
and a number
are
of his
that happened
colleagues on the
as
Republican
fact.
side as well, to
here.
do something, to call for a stop, to end it. Instead, they talked about these people being patriots and great patrons of America. In fact, he says he'll not forgive them for what they've done. They've been convicted. He says he wants to commute their sentences and say that no. But he went to every single court in the nation. I don't know how many cases, scores of cases, including the Supreme Court, and they said, no, this guy is responsible for doing what was done. He didn't do a damn thing, and these people should be in
So
jail.
you'll note,
And they
trying to
should be
show,
the ones who are being held
uh,
accountable. And he wants to let them all out.
rage and
now he
strength
says that he
here
loses again, such a
in
whiner
his
that he is,
response
that
about
they're
what
creating a
happened.
bloodbath.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump?
What they've done to some people that are so innocent, you ought to be ashamed of yourself. What you have done, how you've destroyed the lives of so many people.
Note what's
When
happening
they
here.
ripped down
So
Portland,
again,
when they
deflecting
ripped down,
from what
many other cities.
the
You
question
go to
was and what
Minnesota,
happened in that day,
Minneapolis,
and
what
going
they've done
towards
there
and leaning
with the
into
fires all over the city. If I didn't bring in the National Guard, that
those
city
who
would have
were
been
on the
destroyed.
Capitol that day,
When you look at all of
who entered into
they
the
took
Capitol
over
that
big
day,
chunks of
and
Seattle. I
lifting
was all
them
set to
as
bring in the
the
National Guard. They heard
individuals
that.
who
They saw
were
them coming
impacted
and they
most.
left
Here,
immediately.
and
What
again,
he
very much
said
on
about
brand.
This whole subject is so off. Peacefully patriotic. One other thing. The Unselect Committee, which is basically two horrible Republicans that are all gone now, out of office, and Democrats, all Democrats, they destroyed and deleted all of the information they found because they found out we were right. We were right. And they deleted and destroyed all of the information. They should go to jail for that. If a Republican did that, they'd go to jail.
Thank you, President Trump. President Biden, I want to give you a minute.
The only person on this stage is a convicted felon is the man I'm looking at right now. And the fact of the matter is, what he's telling you is simply not true. The fact is that there was no effort on his part.
Donald Trump's nodding in agreement there.
And all those people, every one of those convicted, deserves to
showed
be
agreement
convicted.
where
The idea that they didn't kill somebody.
he believed that
just
was a
went in
strong
and broke
comeback.
down doors, broke the windows,
And that was not
occupied
all right.
offices, turned over desks, turned them over statues. The idea that those people are patriots, come on. When I asked him the first two debates we had, first time around, I said, will you denounce the Proud Boys? He said, no, I'll tell them to stand by. The idea he's refusing, will you denounce these guys? Will you denounce the people we're talking about now? Will you denounce the people who attacked that
So you notice that the tactic here,
do?
asking him questions directly.
I'm going to
And
give
you'll
you
note
a minute, President Trump, for a follow-up
Donald
question
Trump is
I
not
have.
leaning into that. He is
After a
kind of
jury
like, I don't
convicted
see you, I
of
don't see
34
you.
felonies last month, you said
Which
if reelected,
is different,
you would, quote,
from
have
him.
every right to go after, unquote, your political opponents. You just talked about
But a
members of the
deliberate
Select
choice.
Committee on January 6th going to jail. Your main political opponent is standing on stage with you tonight. Can you clarify exactly what it means about you feeling you have every right to go after your political opponents?
Well, I said my retribution is going to be success. We're going to make this country successful again, because right now it's a failing nation. My retribution is going to be success. But when he talks about a convicted felon, his son is a convicted felon at a very high level. His son is convicted, going to be convicted probably numerous other times. Should have been convicted before, but his Justice Department let
Very much on
the
brand
statute of
here.
limitations lapse on the most important things. But he could be a convicted felon as soon as he gets out of office. Joe could be a convicted felon with all of the things that he's done. He's done horrible things. All of the death caused at the border, telling the Ukrainian people that we're going to want $1 billion or you change the prosecutor. Otherwise, you're not getting $1 billion. If I ever said that, that's quid pro quo. That we're not going to do anything. We're not going to give you $1 billion unless you change your prosecutor, having to do with the son. This man is a criminal. This man, you're lucky. You're lucky.
So
I did nothing wrong. We'd have a system that was rigged and disgusting. I did nothing wrong.
Thank you, President
brand
Trump.
here.
President Biden, you have said, I'm coming right to
The
you, sir.
deflection
You-
and the
you
doubling
wanna
down,
respond? Go ahead.
standing
I'll give
10
you a
toes
minute to
down
respond.
in
The
belief that
idea that I
there was
did
nothing
anything
wrong.
wrong relative to what you're talking about is outrageous. It's simply a lie, number one. Number two,
So you can see the
idea that
restraint
you have a right to seek retribution against any
from
American
Donald Trump
just
here.
because you're
And
president is wrong.
what
It's simply wrong. No president's ever spoken like
Joe
that
Biden is
before.
doing is
No
leaning
president in our history
into
spoke
that
like
vulnerability, which is
Number
off
three,
brand,
the crimes
at least
that
in
you
the
are still
current
charged with,
edition of
think
Joe
all the
Biden.
civil penalties.
But we've
How many
seen
billions of dollars do you owe in civil penalties?
previous,
for
stylings,
molesting a woman in public, for doing a whole range of things,
where he has
of
used that
having
approach of
sex
the
with a porn
direct
star on
talking
the
to
night
and
while
addressing.
your wife was pregnant.
And that is a very
what are you talking
signature
about?
hallmark thing.
You have the morals of an alley cat.
Give you a minute, sir.
I didn't have sex with a porn star, number one. Number two, that was a case that was started and moved. They moved a high-ranking official, a DOJ, into the Manhattan DA's office to start that case. That case is going to be appealed and won. We had a very terrible judge, a horrible judge, Democrat. The prosecutor were all high-ranking Democrats, appointed people, and both the civil and the criminal. He basically went after his political opponent because he thought it was going to damage me. But when the public found out about these cases, because they understand it better than he does, he has no idea what these cases are. But when they found out about these cases, you know what they did? My poll numbers went up, way up. You know that because you're reporting it.
Very
and
much on
we took in
brand
more
here.
money in the last 2 weeks than we've ever taken in the history of any campaign. I don't think any campaign has ever taken
Lifting
hundreds
that
of
something
millions
that
of dollars came
may have
pouring
been
in
perceived
because the public knows
as
it's a scam,
for
and it's a guy that's after his
his
political
bad turned
opponent because he
into
can't
good,
win fair and square.
and that is very
Thank you,
much
President
on
Trump. President
Donald Trump
Biden,
brand.
you have said, quote, Donald Trump and his MAGA Republicans are determined to destroy American democracy. Do you believe that the tens of millions of Americans who are likely to vote for President
Here's an
Trump
opportunity
will
for
be voting
Joe Biden
against
to lean
American
in
democracy?
to some of that
The more
fire
they know about what he's done,
that
yes.
was
The more
expressed.
they know about what he's done. And there's a lot more coming. He's got a lot of cases down the road coming around. He's got a whole range of issues he has to face. I don't know what the juries will do, but I do know he has a real problem. And so the fact that
The puckering of the mouth, the licking of the teeth. Again, very much on brand here. And there's a lot of restraint being shown, which is not on brand.
After my son had died, I decided in Iraq, because of Iraq, I said I wasn't going to run again until I saw what happened in Charlottesville, Virginia. People coming out of the woods carrying swastikas on torches, and singing the same anti-Semitic bile they sang when back in Germany. And the young woman got killed. I spoke to the mother, and they asked him. They said, "What do you think of those people? The people the ones who got killed, the one who tried to stop it, and the ones," he said, "I think they're fine people on both sides." What American president would ever say Nazis coming out of fields carrying torches, singing the same anti-Semitic bile, carrying swastikas were fine people? And this is a guy who says Hitler's done some good things. I'd like to know what they are. The good things Hitler's done, that's what he said. This guy has no sense of American democracy.
President Trump.
Jake, both of you know that story has been totally wiped out, because when you see the sentence,
The
it said
disbelief
100% exoneration on this. So he just keeps it going. He says he ran
on
because of
Joe Biden's
Charlottesville.
face
He ran
is
because of
very
Charlottesville. He ran because
comical.
it was his last chance. He's not equipped to be president. You know it, and I know it. It's ridiculous. We have a debate. We're trying to justify his presidency. His presidency is, without question, the worst president, the worst presidency in the history of our country. We shouldn't be having a debate about it. There's nothing to debate. He made up the Charlottesville story, and you'll see it's debunked all over the place. Every reasonable anchor has debunked it. And just the other day it came out where it was fully debunked. It's a nonsense story. He knows that, and he didn't run because of Charlottesville. He used that as an excuse to run.
President Biden.
And debunked. It happened. All you have to do is listen to what was said at the time. And the idea that somehow that's the only reason I ran. I ran because I was worried a guy like this guy could get elected. If he thought they were good people coming out of that forest, carrying those woods, carrying those torches, then he didn't deserve to be president. Didn't deserve to be president at all. And the idea that he's talking about all this being fabricated, we saw with our own eyes. We saw what happened on January 6th. We saw the people breaking through the windows.
So the pull through here of the denial of what we saw versus what is being said is a little bit pushed away from his brand, but is a very deliberate choice.
So why? They know him well. They serve with him. Why are they not endorsing him?
Thank you, President Biden. We're going to be right back with more from the CNN presidential debate.
Commercial break, y'all.
President Biden, while black unemployment dropped to a record low under your presidency, black families still earn far less than white families. Black mothers are still 3 times more likely to die from pregnancy-related causes, and black Americans are imprisoned at 5 times the rate of white Americans. What do you say to black voters who are disappointed that you haven't made more progress?
They acknowledge they made a lot of progress, number one. The fact of the matter is there's more small black businesses that have been started than any time in history. Number two, the wages of black unemployment is the lowest level it's been in a long, long time. Number three.
So you'll note again the leaning into the point 1, point 2, point 3. Very much on brand and sticking to data in order to get his point across.
Corporations that collude to keep people out of their houses. And in addition to that, we find that
the one thing that I note here is that even though that is on brand, the
choice
direct
that black families
response
have to make relative to child care
is on brand as well, but it takes some being pushed in order to get there.
I was able to reduce,
and that same fire or vigor isn't applied to the point 1, point 2, point 3, which is more scripted. It seems.
You got to make sure, because when you provide those child care protections, you increase economic growth because more people can be in the job market. So There's more to be done, considerably more to be done. But we've done a great deal so far, and I'm not letting up, and they know it.
Let's
you
see the
have
response.
49 seconds left. What do you say to Black voters who are disappointed with the progress so far?
I say I don't blame them for being disappointed. Inflation is still hurting them
Interesting.
badly. For example, I provided for the idea that any Black family first-time home buyer should get a $10,000 tax credit to be able to buy their first home so they can get started. I made sure that we're in a situation where all those Black families and those Black individuals who provided had to take out student loans that were ballooning, that if they were engaged in nursing, doctor, and anything having to do with volunteerism, if they paid their bills for 10 years on their student debt, all the rest is forgiven after 10 years. Millions have benefited from that. And we're going to do a whole lot more for Black families.
Thank you,
So
President
you'll
Trump.
note there was the admission
And he
there.
caused the inflation. He's blaming inflation, and he's right. It's been very bad. He caused the inflation, and it's killing Black families and Hispanic families and just about everybody. It's killing people. They can't buy groceries anymore.
Interesting,
They can't.
on
You look
brand.
at the
So
cost
the
of food
question was
where it's doubled,
specifically about a
tripled, and
specific group.
quadrupled. They
And
can't live.
he's
They're
bringing
not living
in
anymore.
he's bringing
He
in
caused
other
this
groups
inflation.
in
I
order
gave him
to
a
get his
country
point
with
across.
essentially
And that
no
is very much
inflation.
on
It
brand.
was perfect. It was so good. All he had to do is leave it alone. He destroyed it with his Green New scam and all this money that's being thrown out the window. He caused inflation. As sure as you're sitting there, the fact is that his big
Little
kill
shiny.
on the Black people is the millions of people that he's allowed to come in through the border. They're taking Black jobs now, and it could be 18, it could be 19, and even 20 million people. They're taking Black jobs, and they're taking Hispanic jobs, and you haven't seen it yet, but you're going to see something that's going to be the worst in our history.
Thank
So
you,
you'll note
President
again
Biden.
on brand
There
the
was no
pitting
inflation when I became president. You
comparison
know why?
of
The economy was
demographics
flat
as
on
well
its
as the
back.
cultural fear.
50% unemployment. He decimated the economy, absolutely decimated the economy. That's why there was no inflation at the time. There were no jobs. We provided thousands of millions of jobs for individuals who are in all communities, including minority communities. We made sure that they have health insurance. We have covered, the ACA has increased. I made sure that they're $8,000 per person in a family to get written off for the health care. But this guy wants to eliminate that. They tried 50 times. He wants to get rid of the ACA again. And they're going to try again if they win. You find ourselves in a position where the idea that we're not doing any, we put more police on the street than any administration has. He wants to cut the cops. We're providing for equity and making sure people have a shot to make it. There's a lot going on, but in inflation, he caused it by his tremendous malfeasance in the way he handled the pandemic.
So you
Thank
notice
you.
there's
Another
a
persistent
little bit of a
challenge is the climate
stammer
crisis.
here.
2023 was the
which I know
hottest
that
year in
Joe
recorded
Biden
history, and communities
is and has
across
dealt with
the country are
for
confronting
most
the
of his life.
devastating effects of extreme heat, intensifying wildfires, stronger hurricanes, and rising sea levels. Former President Trump, you've vowed to end your opponent's climate initiatives.
We're leaning
but will you
into
take
climate
any
and the
action
environment.
as president to slow
And here
the
is where
climate
I
crisis?
anticipate
Let me just go back to
disparate
what he
views,
said
of
about
course.
the police, how close the police are to him. Almost every police group in the nation
Moving
from
back.
every state is supporting Donald J. Trump. Almost every police group. And what he's done to the Black population is horrible, including the fact that for 10 years he called them super predators. We can't, in the 1990s, we can't forget that.
The
Super
look of shock
predators was his
that
name.
Joe Biden
and he called it to him
is
for 10, and they've taken great
presenting
offense at it,
is
and now
again
they
very
see
much
it
on brand
happening.
here.
But when they see what I did for criminal justice reform and for the historically Black colleges and universities, where I funded them and got them all funded, and the opportunity zones with Tim, as you know, Tim Scott was incredible. He did a great job. Great
On
senator
brand, where
from
you see
South
here
Carolina. He came to
Donald
me
Trump
with the idea. It
lifting
was a great idea. It's one of
his
the most successful
surrogates
economic
that are
development
specific
acts
to this
ever in the
cause.
country.
That
Opportunity
is Tim
zones.
Scott.
And the biggest beneficiary are Blacks. And that's why we have the best numbers with them in maybe ever. They're saying ever. I read this morning where ever the best numbers.
Here is the
He's
opportunity
lost
for Joe
much of
Biden
the
to
Black
come back
population. because he's
some
done a
of
horrible
those
job
things which
for
are
black
deemed as
people. He's
factual
also done a horrible job
out of
for
his administration.
Hispanics. But wait till you see these millions of people pouring into our country, and they're going to take
And
the
again,
jobs.
leaning
And it's already
into
started,
the border
and you haven't
issue
seen anything
here,
yet. It's a disaster.
and the approach of
38
the
seconds left. President Trump, will you take any action
pitting.
as president to slow the climate crisis?
So I want
That
absolutely
question,
immaculate,
Jenna,
clean
excellent
water,
job,
and
was
I want
about
absolutely
the
clean
climate.
air, and we had
Even
it.
I had lost that
We
one
had
for a second.
H2O. We had the best numbers ever, and we were using all forms of energy, all forms, everything. And yet, during my 4 years, I had the best environmental numbers ever. And my top environmental people gave me that statistic just before I walked on the stage, actually.
I don't know where the hell he's been. The idea that anything he said is true. I've passed the most extensive climate change legislation in history. We find ourselves, and by the way, black colleges. I came up with $15 billion for HBCUs, historic black universities.
Okay, so
and
leaning
colleges,
in here
because they
and
don't have
following
those-
him
they don't have
through the
kind of
conversation.
contributors that they have.
So not letting a point
build
slip,
these
but
laboratories
following
look like.
Donald
Any
Trump
black
through a
students can't go to
conversation. So
college
this
and
is
do what any
new.
white student can do. You just have the money, but now they'll be able to get those
A new
jobs
approach
in
to
high tech.
offense
We're in a
that
situation where the
he is
idea
adding,
that
it seems, to
he is
his brand.
claiming to have done something that had the cleanest water. He hadn't done a damn thing.
You'll note here that there is questioning that
I immediately joined
has been
him,
employed
because if we reach
at
1.5
different
degrees
points
Celsius,
during this
and then
debate
he won't- there's no way
by
back.
Joe
The only
Biden
existential
here.
threat to humanity is
Either
climate
he'll
change.
question
And he didn't
Donald
do a
Trump
damn thing
directly,
about it. He
he'll
wants to do all
question,
that I've done.
you know,
The
What
Paris
is it
Accord
about?
was going to cost us $1
and
trillion,
that's new.
and China nothing,
Ish.
and Russia nothing, and India nothing. It was a ripoff of the United States. And I ended it because I didn't want to waste that money because they treat us horribly. We were the only ones. It was costing us money. Nobody else was paying into it. And it was a disaster. But everything that he said just now, I'll give you an example. I heard him say before insulin. I'm the one that got the insulin down for the seniors. I took care of the seniors. What he's doing is destroying all of our medical
you
programs
see this,
because the migrants coming in, they
authority
want
and going
and
back
look,
to these
I have
key
the biggest
points,
heart on the
which he
stage, I
knows
guarantee you that.
are
And I
ones
wanna
that
take care
are
of people.
that
But we're
individuals
destroying
are
our
fearful
country.
of.
They're
So
taking
bringing
over
back
our
to the issue
schools,
of
our
migrants.
hospitals, and they're going to be taking over Social Security. He is destroying Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid.
The idea is that we, in fact,
was off.
we
We saw
were
how it works.
the only ones of consequence who were not members of the Paris Accord. How can we do anything? We've not able. The United States can't get its pollution under control. One of the largest polluters in the world, number one. We're making significant progress. By 2035,
You see what I'm saying,
we will
guys?
have
So again, we're
pollution
going
in
to
half.
point
We've
one,
made-
point
we've
two,
made
point
significant
three.
progress.
This is
We'll
a
continue
tactic
to make
that anybody
progress.
can
We set up
employ,
a climate corps
but it
for
keeps
thousands
people
of
in
young
line
people
with
to
your
learn how
thinking,
to
and it keeps
deal
you
with just
in
like
line
the Peace
with your
Corps.
thinking.
And we're going to
as well.
We're moving in directions that are going to significantly change the elements of cause of pollution. But the idea that he claims that he has the biggest heart up here and he's really concerned about pollution and about climate, I've not seen any indication of that. And by the way, with regard to prescription drugs, one company agreed that they would reduce the price to $35, which I was calling for, one, voluntarily. I made sure every company in the world, every pharmaceutical company, cannot have to pay.
Thank you.
And by the way,
So every day, millions of Americans struggle just to make ends meet. For many older Americans, Social Security provides a critical lifeline. President Biden, if nothing is done to Social Security, seniors will see their benefits cut in just over 10 years. Will you name tonight one specific step that you're willing to take to keep Social Security solvent?
yes, make the very wealthy begin to pay their fair share. Right now,
So again, that
everybody making under $170,000.
so asking a question, how do you feel? I feel
of their
great,
income
right? So
of their
it
paycheck. Every single
establishes
time they get a
an
paycheck,
authority,
every time
and
the
both
first one they
candidates
get
have
when
employed
they're
that
18
here.
years old. The idea that they're going to, I've been proposing that everybody, they pay, the millionaires pay 1%. 1%. So no one I would not raise the cost of Social Security for anybody under $400,000. After that, I began to make the wealthy begin to pay their fair share by increasing from 1% beyond to be able to guarantee the program for life.
So you still have 82 seconds left. Are there any other measures that you think that would be able to help keep Social Security solvent?
It's interesting.
Is that one enough?
Well, no, that one enough will keep it solvent. But the biggest thing I'll do if we defeat this man, because he wants to get rid of Social Security.
So again,
he thinks
addressing
there's
as
plenty
if
to
other.
cut in Social Security. He's wanted to cut Social Security and Medicare both times, and that's what. And if you look at the program put forward by the House Republican caucus that he, I believe, supports, is in fact want to cut it as well. The idea that we don't need to protect our seniors is ridiculous. And by the way, the American public has greater health care coverage today than ever before. And on the ACA, as I said, you're in a circumstance where 400,000 people, 40 million people would not have insurance because they have a pre-existing condition. Only thing that allows them to have that insurance is the fact that they, in fact, are part of the ACA. And by the way, the other thing is we're in a situation where we talk about education for black communities. I've raised the amount of money for Pell Grants by another $8,000. So anybody making under $70,000 a year is going to be able to get
So you'll see he followed, and he is actually employing the style of.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump.
In using the opportunity to bring back
all my life.
questions that have
I've been on this
previously
side of the equation for the last 8 years. I've never seen anybody lie like this guy. He lies. I've never seen it. He can look you in the face. About so many other things too. And we mentioned the laptop. We mentioned Russia, Ukraine. Everything he does is a lie. It's misinformation and disinformation. The losers and sucker story that he made up is a total lie on the military. It's a disgrace. But Social Security, he's destroying it because millions of people are pouring into our country, and they're putting them onto Social Security.
Again,
they're putting them onto Medicare,
of,
Medicaid. They're putting them in our hospitals.
issue.
They're taking the place of our citizens. What they're doing to the VA, to our veterans, is unbelievable. Our veterans are living in the street, and these people are living in luxury hotels. He doesn't know what he's doing, and it's really coming back. I've never seen such anger in our country before.
President Biden?
The idea that veterans are not being taken care of, I told you before. And by the way, when I said suckers and losers, he acknowledged after that he fired that general. That general got fired because he's the one that acknowledged that that's what he said. He was the one standing with Trump.
Nodding of the head in agreement here.
Number one. Number two, the idea that we're going to be in a situation
I've seen about 3 times in this conversation, and not on brand
he talks about it. Illegal aliens are coming into the country and taking away our jobs. There's a reason why we have the fastest growing economy in the world. The reason why we have the most successful economy in the world. We're doing better than any other nation in the world. And by the way, those 15 Nobel laureates he talked about being phony, those 15 Nobel laureates, economists, they all said that if Trump is reelected, we're likely to have a recession and inflation is going to increasingly go up. And by the way, worst president in history, 159 presidential scholars voted him the worst president in the history of the United States of America.
You could see
President
the
Biden,
restraint.
thank you so much.
There.
Let's turn to the cost of child care, which many American families struggle to
Not on
afford.
brand,
President
but
Trump, both you and President Biden have tried to address this issue.
Meaning
But the average
from
cost of
Donald
child care in this
Trump's
country has risen to more than $11,000 a year per child. For many families, the cost of child care for 2 children is more than their rent. In your second term, what would you do to make child care more affordable?
Just to go back, the general got fired because he was no good. And if he said that, that's why he made it up. But we have 19 people that said I didn't say it, and they're very highly respected, much more so than him. The other thing is, he doesn't fire people. He never fired people. I've never seen him fire anybody. I did fire a lot. I fired Comey because he was no good. I fired a lot of the top people at the FBI, drained the swamp. They were no good. Not easy to fire people. You'd pay a price for it, but they were no good. I inherited these people. I didn't put them there. I didn't put Comey there. He was no good. I fired him. This guy hasn't fired anybody. He never fires. He should have fired every military man that was involved with that the Afghanistan horror show, the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. He didn't fire. Did you fire anybody? Did you fire anybody that's on the border that's allowed us to have the worst border in the history of the world? Did anybody get fired for allowing 18 million people?
You see the flip here
many
of
from
that being
prisons,
employed.
many from mental institutions? Did you fire anybody
antagonize.
that allowed our country to be destroyed? Joe, our country is being destroyed as you and I sit up here
Let's
and waste
see
a lot of
the
time on
approach
this
here.
debate. This shouldn't be a debate. He is the worst president. He just said about me because I said it. But look, he's the worst president in the
That was
history
very
of our
much on
country.
brand.
He's destroyed our
Even
country.
I had to laugh,
Now all
both
of a
of
sudden
us.
he's trying to get a little tough on the border. He came out with a nothing deal, and it reduced it a little bit, like this much. It's insignificant. He wants
Very
open
much on
borders.
brand.
He wants our country to either be
like this
destroyed
much.
or he wants to pick up
So
those
you
people
see the two
as
different
voters.
styles here,
And
but
I don't
very
think
much for
we
both
just
of
can't let it
them,
happen.
you know, part
If
of their
he
personal branding,
wins
part
this
of
election,
who they
our
are.
country doesn't have a chance, not even a chance, of coming out of this rut. We probably won't have a country left anymore. That's how bad it is. He is the worst in history by far.
Thank you, President Trump. President Biden?
We're the most admired country in the world. We're the United States of America. There's nothing beyond our capacity. We have the finest military in the history of the world, the finest in the history of the world. No one thinks we're weak. No one wants to screw around with us. Nobody, number one. Number two, the idea that we're talking about worst presidents. I wasn't joking. Look it up or go online. 159 or 58, don't hold me the exact number, presidential historians, they've had meetings and they voted who was the worst president in American history. One through best to worst. They said he was the worst in all of American history. That's a fact. That's not conjecture. You can
Again,
argue
the
they're wrong, but
faces,
that's
the
what they voted.
smugness, the
The
smiling,
idea that he is no
by,
doing anything to deal with
Donald
child
Trump.
care. He did for virtually nothing to child care. We should significantly increase the child care tax credit. We should significantly increase the availability of women and men or single parents to be able to go back to work. And we should encourage businesses to have
Thank you, President
child care
Biden.
facilities.
President Trump, the question was about what would you do to make child care more affordable, if you want to take your minute.
Just so you understand, we have polling, we have other things they rate him the worst because what he's done is so bad. And they rate me, I'll show you, I will show you. And they rate me one of the best, okay? And if I'm given another 4 years, I will be the best. I think I'll be the best. Nobody's ever
Let's see the
created an economy
approach and the
like us.
retort
Nobody ever
here.
cut taxes like us. He's the
That
only one I know.
garnered
He
a
wants to
strong
raise your
reaction
taxes by
from,
4 times.
Joe Biden,
He wants to raise
which
everybody's
is,
taxes
the
by 4 times. He
approachability
wants the Trump
part
tax cuts
has
to
not been
expire.
lifted so far.
Everybody, including the two of you, are
but
going to
we're
pay 4 to
noticing
5
that
times. Nobody
in
ever
that
heard of this
laugh,
before. All my life,
kinda
I
came
grow up
through.
and I see
So let's see
politicians
if he
talking about
continues to
cutting
pull that
taxes.
through here.
When we cut taxes,
that is
as
very
I
much
said,
on brand.
we
Remember
did
having
more
the
business.
beer
Apple and
summit?
all these companies, they were bringing
We
money
saw a
back
little bit
into
of
our
that,
country. The worst
that
president
vibe
in history
just
by
now.
far, and everybody knows it.
President Biden?
Look, the fact of the matter is that he's dead wrong about. He's increased the tariff. He will increase the taxes on middle class people. I said I'd never raise a tax on anybody making less than $400,000. I didn't. But this tariff is 10% tariffs. Everything coming into the country. You know what the economists say? That's going to cost the average American
So you'll note the leaning in again
$2,500 a year
into facts and
more
the
because they're going to have
less,
to pay the difference in food
lessening
and all the things that are very
the
important.
barbs.
Number two,
or that is
he's
the
in a
personal
situation
death
where
here.
he talks about how he has
And that is,
not raised,
again,
he's
very much on brand.
somehow helped the middle class. Middle class have been devastated by you. Now you want a new tax cut of $5 trillion over the next 10 years, which is going to fundamentally bankrupt the country. You had the largest deficit of any president in American history, number one. Number two, you have not, in fact, made any contact, any progress with China. We are the lowest trade deficit with China since 2010.
Thank you,
We were at the
President
highest.
Biden.
You lost
Thank you, President Biden. Let's discuss an epidemic impacting millions of Americans that both of you have made a top priority in your first term, the opioid crisis. And for both of you, the number of overdose deaths in this country has gone up. Under your term, it went up. Under your term, it has gone up. Former
So you'll
President
see
Trump,
here
despite the
that the
efforts that both of you
moderator,
have made, more than
is
100,000
pulling through
Americans are dying
facts
from overdoses
here
every year,
that
primarily
this
from
happened,
fentanyl and other
this phenomena
opioids. What will you
happened
do to
under
help
both,
Americans
and he's
right
challenging
now
them
in the
to now
throes of
answer.
addiction
So let's
who are
see
struggling to get
if
the
they
treatment they need?
still counter
To finish up,
or blame each other.
we now have the largest deficit in the history of our country under this guy. We have the largest deficit
This guy,
with China.
so again, the approachability.
He gets paid by China. He's a Manchurian candidate. He gets money from China. So I think he's afraid to deal with them or something. But do you notice he never took out my tariffs because we bring in so much money with the tariffs that I imposed on China. He never took them away. He can't because it's too much money. It's tremendous. And we saved our steel industries, and there was more to come, but he hasn't done that. But he hasn't cut the tariffs because he can't, because it's too much money. But he's got the largest deficit in the history of our country, and he's got the worst situation with China. China's going to own us if you keep allowing them to do what they're doing to us as a country. They are killing us as a country, Joe, and you can't let that happen. You're destroying our country.
So, President Trump, you have 67 seconds left. The question was, what are you going to do to help Americans in the throes of addiction right now who are struggling to get the treatment they need?
But Jake, we were doing very well at addiction until the
even
COVID
there,
came
he
along.
did not
We had
stick
the
to
2.5,
the,
almost 3 years like nobody's ever had before, any country, in every way.
To go in a different
and then we had to
direction,
get tough.
which was
And it was
reactive.
the drugs pouring across the border were it started to increase. We got great equipment. We bought the certain dog that's the most incredible thing that you've ever seen, the way they can spot it. We did a lot, and we were getting very low numbers, very, very low numbers. Then he came along. The numbers, have you seen the numbers now? It's not only the 18 million people that I believe is even low, because the gotaways, they don't even talk about gotaways. But the numbers of the amount of drugs and human trafficking in women coming across our border, the worst thing I've ever seen, at numbers that nobody's ever seen under him because the border's so bad. But the number of drugs coming across our border now is the largest we've ever had by far.
President Trump, thank you. President Biden?
Fentanyl and the byproducts of fentanyl went down for a while. And I wanted to make sure we use the machinery that can detect fentanyl, these big machines that roll over everything that comes across the border. And it costs a lot of money. That was part of this deal we put together.
The eyebrow raised, the eyes open.
More fentanyl machines.
You know, we do this to
detect drugs,
prove a point, right?
More numbers of agents.
Along with the hand gestures here.
At the border.
You'll note that this has been more increased with Joe Biden as the night has gone on.
It's going to hurt me politically. No, he never argued it's not a good bill. It's a really good bill. We need those machines. We need those machines. And we're coming down very hard in every country in Asia in terms of precursors for fentanyl. And Mexico is working with us to make sure they don't have the technology to be able to put it together. That's what we have to do. We need those machines.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump, and again, the question is about Americans in the throes of addiction right now struggling to get the treatment they need.
Well, this does pertain to it. He ended Remain in Mexico. He ended catch and release. I made it catch and release in Mexico, not catch and release here. We had so many things that we had done, hard negotiations with Mexico, and I got it all for nothing. It's just like when you have a hostage. We always pay $6 billion for a hostage. Every time we seize a hostage.
Again, being pulled through, and that is, again, very much on brand. We've been hearing that from the
I think a good guy.
And the very beginning,
he's over there because Putin is laughing at this guy, probably asking for billions of dollars for the reporter. I will have him out very quickly as soon as I take office. Before I take office, I said by literally as soon as I win the election, I will have that reporter out. He should have had him out a long time ago, but Putin's probably asking for billions and billions of dollars because this guy pays it every time. We had 2 cases where we paid $6 billion for 5 people. I got 58 people out, and I paid essentially nothing.
Thank you, President Trump. Dana?
Let's turn to concerns that voters have about each of you. President Biden, you would be 86 at the end of your second term. How do you address concerns about your capability to handle the toughest job in the world well into your 80s?
Well, first of all, I spent half my career being criticized being the youngest person in politics. I was the second youngest person ever elected to the United States Senate, and now I'm the oldest. This guy's 3 years younger and a lot less competent. I think that just look at the record. Look at what I've done. Look how I've turned around the horrible situation he left me. As I said, 15 million new jobs, 800,000 manufacturing jobs, more investment in America, over billions of dollars in private investment in enterprises that we are growing. By the way, we brought off a lot of people. The whole idea of computer chips, we used to have 40% of the market. We invented those chips, and we lost it because he was sending people to find the cheapest jobs overseas and to bring home a product. So I went to South Korea. I convinced Samsung to invest billions of dollars here in the United States. And guess what? Those fabs, they call them, to build these chips, those fabs pay over $100,000. You don't need a college degree for them. And there's billions, about $40 billion already being invested and being built right now in the United States, creating significant jobs for Americans from all over the world.
President Biden, you have 40 seconds left. Would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I would. The idea that somehow we are this
again,
failing country.
Very unusual, but
like
they're having
we're the envy of the world.
the time left, which is a great thing for conciseness, but in this instance, using the time as much as you can to be able to get out the points you want to get out related to the message that you want to land here. But it's interesting to note
all of our allies.
that both of them are finishing in most instances with
Kim
lots of
Jong-un,
time
we
left.
sent love letters to, and Putin, etc. They don't want to screw around.
The
with
love
us.
letters to
Thank you.
Putin was a
For
deliberate
President Trump
choice.
to
Again,
follow up,
you
you
notice
would
the
be
eyes
82
open here.
at the end of your second term. What do you say to voters who have concerns about your capabilities to
Let's see
serve?
the approach here.
Well, I took 2 tests, cognitive tests. I aced them, both of them, as you know. We made it public. He took none. I'd like to see him take one, just one, a real easy one. Like go through the first 5 questions. He couldn't do it.
Very much on
But I
brand.
took 2 cognitive tests. I took physical exams every year. And, we knock on wood wherever we may have wood, that I'm in very good health. I just won 2 club championships, not even senior, 2 regular club championships. To do that, you have to be quite smart, and you have to be able to hit the ball a long way, and I do it. He doesn't do it. He can't hit a ball 50 yards. He challenged me to a golf match. He can't hit a ball 50 yards. I think I'm in very
Did
good
he
shape. I
challenge you
feel
to a
that I'm
golf
as in good a shape as I was 25, 30 years ago. Actually, I'm probably a little bit lighter, but I'm in as good a shape
This
as
is
I was
on very much on brand.
years ago. I feel
So
very good. I
expressing
feel
the
same.
strength,
But
the
I was willing to
vitality.
take a cognitive test. And you know what? If I didn't do well, I aced them. Dr. Ronnie Jackson, who's a great guy when he was White House doctor. And then I took another one, a similar one. And one of them said they've never seen anybody ace them.
Thank you. President Biden?
You can see he is 6'5" and only 223 pounds, or 235 pounds. Well, you said 6'4", 200. Well, anyway, that's it. Anyway, just take a look at what he says he is. And
So that was a
think what he
very
is.
deliberate
Look, I'd be
and
happy to have a
actually
driving contest
interesting
then.
choice.
I got my
Returning the
handicap,
energy.
which when I
You know
was
how they say
vice
returning the
president,
energy.
down to a 6. But by the way, I told you before, I'm happy to play golf if you carry your own bag. Think you can do it?
That's the biggest lie. He's a 6 handicap of all.
I was an 8 handicap.
Yeah.
8.
Never.
But I have, how many?
I've seen you swing. I know you swing.
Okay,
Let's not act like children.
President Trump, we're going to
21
turn
Let's not act like children.
You
to
are
a
a child.
specific concern
That
voters have
whole
about
exchange.
you. Will you pledge tonight that once
On
all
brand.
legal
For both.
challenges have been exhausted, that
And
you
I just
will
noted the
accept
lights
the
went
results
up
of this
on,
election,
on
regardless
YouTube
of
here.
who wins, and you will say right
The
now that
audiences
political
enjoyed
violence in
that-
any
that
form
spar.
is unacceptable.
Well, I shouldn't have to say that, but of course I believe that. It's totally unacceptable. And if you would see my statements that I made on Twitter at the time, and also
but he-
my
did they
statement that I
really
made in the
challenge
Rose
each other
Garden,
to a
you would
golf?
say it's one of the strongest statements you've ever seen. In addition to the speech I made in front of, I believe, the largest crowd I've ever spoken to. And I will tell you, nobody ever talks about that. They talk about a relatively small number of people that went to the Capitol, and in many cases were ushered in by the police. And as Nancy Pelosi said, it was her responsibility, not mine. She said that loud and clear. But the answer is, if the election is fair, free, and I want that more than anybody. And I'll tell you something. I wish he was a great president, because I wouldn't be here right now. I'd be at one of my many places enjoying myself. I wouldn't be under
Very on
indictment
brand.
because I wouldn't have been his political opponent, because he indicted me because I was his opponent. I wish he was a great president. I would rather have that. I wouldn't be here. I don't mind being here. But the only reason I'm here is he's so bad as a president that I'm going to make America great again. We're going to make America great again. We're a failing nation right now. We're a seriously failing nation. And we're a failing nation because of him. His policies are so bad. His military policies are insane. They're insane. These are wars that will never end with him.
You'll note
He will drive us into World War III, and we're closer to World War III than anybody can imagine. We are very, very close to World War III, and he's driving us there. And Kim Jong-un and President Xi of China, Kim Jong-un of North Korea, all of these, Putin, they don't respect him. They don't fear him. They have
so
nothing
again,
going
a
with this
lot
gentleman,
of
and he's
personal
going to drive
brand
us into World
things
War
pulled
III.
through here, y'all.
You want a World War III.
That is using his slogan. That is, again, pushing the relationships, the personal relationships that he has with these other world leaders that are controversial or seen as controversial. I'm in here.
I can't think of a single major leader in the world who wouldn't trade places with the job I've done and what they've done. Because we are a powerful nation. We have wonderful peace. Because of the people, not me. It's because of the American people. They're capable of anything, and they step up when they're needed.
Very much
and
on
right
brand.
now,
The humility, stepping away from it wasn't me, it was the American people.
You want to have a war, just let Putin go ahead and take Kyiv, make sure they move on, see what happens in Poland, Hungary, and other places along that border. Then you have a war.
President Trump, as I come back to you for a follow-up, the question was, will you accept the results of this election, regardless of who wins?
Just to finish what he said, if I might, Russia, they took a lot of land from Bush. They took a lot of land from Obama and Biden. They took no land, nothing from Trump, nothing. He knew not to do it. He's not going to play games with me. He knew that. I got along with him very well, but
Again,
he knew not to play games.
Brand.
He took nothing from me.
I have strength, vitality,
But now
sway,
he's going to take
influence.
the whole thing from this man right here.
You know not to test
That's
me.
a war that
Very
should
much
have
on
never
brand here.
started. It would have never started ever with me. And he's going to take Ukraine. And, you know, you asked me a question before, would you do this? He's got us in such a bad position right now with Ukraine and Russia because Ukraine's not winning that war. He said, I will never settle until such time.
Very
They're
much
running
on
out of
brand
people.
there
They're
with the
running out of
mocking.
soldiers. They've lost so
We've
many
seen
people.
this
It's
before.
so sad. They've lost so many people, and they've lost those
part of the
gorgeous cities with the
relatability
golden domes that are 1,000 years old,
and
all
why he
because of
resonates
him
with,
and stupid decisions.
a few people.
Russia would have never
Quite a
attacked
few people.
if I were
President Trump,
president.
the question was, will you accept the results of the election, regardless of who wins? Yes or no, please.
If it's a fair and legal and good election, absolutely.
On
I would
brand,
have
this
much
answer.
rather accepted these, but the fraud and everything else was ridiculous. And if you want, we'll have a news conference on it in a week, or we'll have another one of these in a week. But I will absolutely, there's nothing I'd rather do. It would be much easier for me to do that than I'm running again. I wasn't really going to run until I saw the horrible job he did. He's destroying our country. I would be very happy to be someplace else, in a nice location someplace. And again, no indictments, no political opponent stuff, because it's the only way he thinks he can win. But unfortunately, it's driven up my numbers and driven them up to a very high level because the people understand it.
Well, let's see what your numbers are when this election is over. Let's see. You're a whiner. When you lost the first time, you
could
continued.
see.
You appealed
So that
and
was
appealed
a
courts all
visceral
across the country.
response.
Not
Again,
one
not on
single
brand,
court
but
in
on
America
brand.
Said any
And
claims
he is
that any
employing
mayor,
the
state
barbs
or local,
and
none.
his responses
But you continue to
strategically,
promote this lie
intentionally.
about somehow there's all this misrepresentation, all this stealing. There is no evidence of that at all. And I tell you what, I doubt whether you'll accept it because you're such a whiner. The idea, if you lose again,
So
you accept anything,
these-
you can't stand the loss. Something snapped in you when you lost the last time.
intentional.
We'll be right back
You could see the restraint.
with more from the CNN
that was
presidential
being
debate,
employed.
live from Georgia.
It is now time for the candidates to deliver their closing statements as predetermined by a coin toss. We're going to begin with you, President Biden. You have 2 minutes.
We've made significant progress from the
Here's the
debacle that was
close.
left
Let's
by
see
President
how the
Trump
personal
in
brands are pulled
his
through.
last term. We find ourselves in a situation where, number one, we have to make sure that we have a fair tax system. I ask anyone out there in the audience, or anyone out watching this debate, do you think the tax system is fair? The fact is that I said nobody even making under $400,000 had a single penny increase in their taxes, and will not. And if I'm reelected, that'll be the case again. But this guy has increased your taxes because of the deficit, number one. He's increased inflation because of the debacle he left after the way he handled the pandemic. And he finds himself in a position where he now wants to tax you more by putting a 10% tariff on everything that comes into the United States of America. What I did, when, for example, he wants to get rid of the ability of Medicare for us to be able to negotiate drug prices with the big pharma companies. Well, guess what? We got it down to $35 for insulin instead of $400. No more than $2,000 for every senior, no matter how much prescription they need. You know what that did? That reduced the federal debt by $160 billion over 10 years because the government doesn't have to pay these exorbitant prices. I'm going to make that available to every senior all along, it's happening now, and everybody in America. He wants to get rid of that. I'm going to make sure that we have child care. We're going to significantly increase the credits people have for child care. I'm going to make sure we do something about what we're doing on lead pipes and all the things that are causing health problems for people across the country. We're going to continue to fight to bring down inflation and give people a break.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump, you now have 2 minutes for your closing statement.
Like so many politicians, this man is just a complainer. He said, we want to do this, we want to do that, we want to get rid of this tax, that tax.
Very much on brand here.
But he doesn't do anything. All he does is make our country unsafe by allowing millions and millions of people to pour in. Our military doesn't respect him. We look like fools in Afghanistan. We didn't stop Israel. It was such a horrible thing that would have never happened. It should have never happened. Iran was broke. Anybody that did business with Iran, including China, they couldn't do business with the United States. They all passed. Iran was broke. They had no money for Hamas or Hezbollah, for terror, no money whatsoever. Again, Ukraine should have never happened. He talks about all this stuff, but he didn't do it. For 3.5 years, we're living in hell. We have the Palestinians and we have everybody else rioting all over the place. You talk about Charlottesville. This is 100 times Charlottesville, 1,000 times. The whole country is exploding because of you, because they don't respect you. And they have to respect their president, and they don't respect you throughout the world. What we did was incredible. We rebuilt the military. We got the largest tax cut in history, the largest regulation cut in history. The reason he's got jobs is because I cut the regulations that gave jobs. But he's putting a lot of those regulations back on. All of the things that we've done, nobody's never seen anything like. Even from a medical standpoint, right to try, where we can try space-age materials instead of going to Asia or going to Europe and trying to get when you're terminally ill. Now you can go and you can get something. You sign a document. They've been trying to get it for 42 years. But you know what we did for the military was incredible. Choice for our soldiers, where our soldiers, instead of waiting for 3 months to see a doctor, can go out and get themselves fixed up and readied up and take care of themselves, and they're living. And that's why I had the highest approval rating in the history of the VA. So all of these things, we're in a failing nation, but it's not going to be failing anymore. We're going to make it great again.
Thank you, former President Trump.
Tagline,
President Biden, stay with us because we have full analysis of this debate. Anderson Cooper and Aaron Burnett starts now on CNN.
So again, being really clear, this is me reacting to things that are signature to these two individuals regarding their personal brand and how they employ these things specific to their personal brand. All right, you ready? Let's go. That was quite interesting, but not surprising. So I haven't been out in the world yet to hear what others are thinking or receiving other reactions to what we just experienced together. You saw Donald Trump employ tactics that are usual to him. So a lot of the hand gestures here, a lot of the, repetitiveness, so the billions and billions to drive the point home, a lot of the raised voice. And when he wasn't talking, you saw a lot of his reaction here in that face, the pursed lips. All of these things were employed. As well, he leaned into the messages that are connected to fear and brought that forward as a pull-through, no matter what the question was and how it was asked of him. When we look at Joe Biden's tactics here, he stuck to naming the facts. And so you could see that he would say fact 1, fact 2, fact 3. And you saw me calling that out quite a few times. He stayed really close to that throughout. I would say that we noticed more vigor from him when it came to those personal barbs and him just looking directly at Donald Trump in order to address him, when you didn't see that so much happen in reverse. And that is very much in line with Joe Biden's brand. The other thing, which I thought was very interesting, is you notice that there was this intentionality from Joe Biden's side to push a little bit, to do a little bit of that poking, right? And it was very uncharacteristic of him, but he was giving that energy to see if it would be returned to him. And so that was off brand, but it was strategic. It was being employed in a way to get response. And sometimes we may have to do that. Sometimes we may have to lean into being a little bit off brand in order to get what it is that we're trying to get out of the conversation. There were notably some points where Joe Biden, you could tell, had lost his train of thought and was having quite a bit of a difficult time getting back on track. That was noticed very early on in the conversation. And while it may not be fully characteristic of the personal brand, it has been more evident in the last couple of years. It's been more evident to most. And so there was the opportunity to kind of squash what that connection may be and how that is impacting his personal brand. But I don't know if we were able to witness that this evening. I am not a pollster, y'all. I am not a politician. This reaction is purely from a brand and marketing perspective. As I stated, I am obsessed with all things personal brand. And so there we have it. More to come. This is being recorded before I have been impacted, persuaded. That's all for now. Good night. Good morning, good afternoon. I hope this finds you well. And remember, you are capable of big things. I'll see you next time.